They didn't try to fix it. They didn't try to say, oh, everything's going to be okay. They
Mm,
just bore witness to it. And
mm,
that was magical. That was amazing to not have someone come in and try to take it away or
mm.
wash it away. Because when we try to wash it away or tell someone, no, 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 everything's going to be okay, we actually wind up dismissing that pain because it's too much for the
Mm.
person on the other side to carry. But they just bear witness to it, they help you carry it.
The conversation you're about to hear is likely going to be different than what you're used to listening to on most podcasts. In most podcasts, when we talk to somebody who has overcome a challenge or achieved something great in their life, we focus on things like what they did, the steps they took, and the advice they have for us. My name is Brian Fretwell. As a coach and as a consultant, my job is to show people how to build community into their lives and connection into their interactions. And I wanted to create a podcast that shows how impactful that is in some of the most trying times in our lives. What you're going to hear is questions designed not just to find what the individual did, but to how they engage their community, how they talk to other people, how loneliness pulled them back, and how they eventually move forward in community. My hope is that these conversations allow us to see how important connection and community and relationships are for doing the big important things in our lives. Because in a world where there are more problems than we could ever solve alone, I hope you hear in these conversations the reality that there is no challenge we can't overcome together. We are picking up right where we left off in our prior conversation with Jennifer Shaw. If you've not heard episode 1 of Jennifer's conversation, you might pause this and go listen to it now. In this episode, we jump right in where the conversation left off. Jennifer's acknowledgement of the impact her injury is having on others, what that insight meant for her, what it started to change. And throughout the episode, Jen shares amazing insights on what those changes did for her and her friends and her community. I hope you enjoy it. Yeah. In what I hear in that, like in that interaction, I guess I would ask it, what did that help you see in that moment? Like that you weren't seeing prior to that.
It's well, it's hard when you are the one, you're getting taken care of, right? And you know how much that asks. For me, in those moments, because it was like everything was a process, right? Every step I took throughout the day was a process. It hadn't fully registered on me the impact that this was having on my husband and the amount of work that he had to put in simply to get me through a day.
And it
And
seems
I
to
think
me,
that
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
flipped it into, wait a minute, this is way bigger. This is about that I think is fully when I understood the text. I fully understood what was behind the text from my friends, from people that were further out, from people I didn't know that well, from my close friends, from my family. I was able to fully grasp maybe what they were experiencing on the other side of this.
Which was,
How hard it was to see someone you love go through something like this, and how I think for me specifically with my husband, how much he had to give up to get me through
mm,
this. Hard he had to work.
it sounds like that was the moment that you kind of had to realize, like it or not, you're not doing this alone. And I don't necessarily mean that from like there was an acknowledgement of people taking care of me, people supporting me, but that you're not doing the pain alone either.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that, how does that change it? How did that start to change how you communicated and maybe even how you approached it?
I think it it was very humbling in that moment to kind of realize how far the people around me were going during this really isolating time of COVID to try and help. And I remember from day one feeling a lot of gratitude just for, because I had to surrender. I had to allow. I'm a pretty self-sufficient person, and I'd never really been in that position before. I had to allow other people to help me, and I was really able to see that for some reason there was something that wasn't clicking. And that was finally that click that was like, oh, me getting better is good for all of us. And I have to rethink how all of this impacts the people around me. And it made me very aware of that. I don't know if
Mm.
that answers the question, but it's hard to articulate.
Well, it seems like, and I hear this a lot, is that like we don't want to have an impact on others, right? We don't like positive for sure, but definitely we don't want a negative one. And sometimes that impact isn't in our control, right? That we are having an impact, and especially in something like this, and acknowledging that requires an internal acknowledgement, right? Like it butts up against
Yeah.
like, am I worth being, like having people be in pain, for me to some degree. I'm curious when you said there that, like having to acknowledge this and do this, what started changing in how you interacted with folks from there? Like, how did they start changing? Because we had talked before that there was some changes in the dynamics of relationships in there. But when you have this, oh, I'm really appreciative and I'm supportive, but now, oh, I can start to see the impact it's having, perhaps on my team at work, certainly with my family. How does that change how you started responding to them, right? Them responding to you, perhaps.
There was a point in there with my team at work. They were so incredible because it seemed like they stopped adding me to, you're always on your phone, right? And
Hmm.
it seemed like the emails about work stopped coming through. And I think that they didn't want me to have to look at that. And I remember at one point I said to them, after realizing the gravity of what was happening, I was like, you guys are doing an amazing job. Please keep going. I am afraid that my FOMO is causing me to give answers to work related questions that aren't clear. I might be making things worse. So I'm going to step back for a few weeks. I had to realize my own limitations in there. And I think it changed how I approach my friends and starting to acknowledge what was really happening and maybe what some of my thought processes were. They were going through their own hard experiences at the time as well. So I knew that at some point I had agency for how I was going to show up in these moments. Something shifted in my interest in getting better. It's hard, when you're in this full body brace, it's got an iron bar down the front. It's like a corset that you're velcroed into. And we called it the turtle shell because it has a hard plastic back. This turtle shell was so hard and I wanted to be out of it. You're literally trapped inside
Hmm.
of this. You're broken at the center of your body. The top half and the bottom half are broken, literally. And it was such a physically disconnective experience that like it's easy to fall into just focusing on that and what is happening to you in that moment. It's almost like you have these blinders on of like, I just have to figure out how to eat something. I have to figure out how to take one step further down the hall, right? It's because even just walking was like one additional step a day. When I was finally able to go outside and do a lap around my car, it was like I'd won the Olympics,
Mm.
you know. And I think that recognizing the impact again on my friends who were going through their own stuff, there were two of them that would just come sit in the bedroom with me. We'd just sit. We'd crack jokes, we'd talk. And
Did
sometimes we
you
just sat together.
did you invite them? Did they just show up kind of
Usually it
unexpectedly?
was kind of scheduled because we would be like, okay, are you going to be
Hmm.
masked? Are we going to be mat? Right. It was the whole thing. And we
Hmm.
had this was our little pod and we were very safe, but just to have these friends just sit. And we kind of talked earlier before we jumped on this call about the importance of bearing witness to what each other was going through. Like it was, I don't know, for me, it's easier to bear witness to somebody else's pain, but to have somebody bear witness to
Mm.
mine was pretty special. It's a pretty intimate thing to just sit with somebody when they're,
And did the after that discussion with your husband, when this started, that impact on others seemed to get bigger, was scheduling these things, did that become more or less important? Is it something that they had, were they reaching out to you to schedule or vice versa? Like,
they would reach out. I think they were reaching out to me. And I think it did become more important because my husband honestly sometimes needed a break, right? I mean, it's a
mm,
lot to be a caregiver for somebody on that level for so many weeks. And he needed some space because there's the act of giving care, right? But then he's also experiencing his own stuff around watching me go through this and having the questions of how severe will the long-term damage be? We didn't know, right?
mhm.
He, so he had his own emotional stuff around it to carry. So anytime my friends would come over, it kind of gave him just a minute to be by himself or to go for a walk or to talk to his friends and family.
And you said, kind of as you were describing it earlier, that like after that conversation with your husband, the shift in focus was now about healing, which I think is interesting. That like before it was kind of, I don't want to say this selfishly, but like I've got this, I'm going to figure it out, I'm going to take care of other people. And then there's this discovery of like, oh man, I'm having an impact on other people. But it was that, like, using your word, that surrender to that impact, that like, because now I'm not doing alone, now I'm going to focus on actually getting healthy.
Mhm.
How did the visits of people just coming in and sitting with you, how did that play into that, help you be healthy, if that makes sense? How is the bearing witness in there helpful as it relates to wanting to get healthy again?
I think in those first few weeks when you're kind of just in this survival mode, right? Like I just
Mhm.
have to get through the crisis point and I want to do it with as little impact. I want everyone to think I'm fine. I don't want them to worry about me. I think when that, okay, we've got to start healing now, Jen, I think I was able to be more honest with them about what was really happening. In those first weeks, again, it's you're just in this silo. You're trapped in this body that needs to heal. You're trapped in this brace that is unforgiving. You can't turn your body, you can't turn your head, you can't do anything that you nor these motions we take for granted. Again, it was so profound, and you're just stuck thinking about that and stuck replaying the event over and over in your mind. Like, what part of that fall was my fault? And to have my friends and my family and my husband, and at that point, my physical therapist just sit in there with me and just be part of that brought me out of the story in my head. It took me outside into something else. It gave me a break from the narratives that we're
And
building.
as I'm hearing it, it sounds like some of this kind of control in the beginning, and then even like the narrative was about addressing the confidence. Like it sounds like your confidence was really shaken, which sort of kept these narratives going. What did I do? What was wrong? And at the same time, what I'm hearing is like after the conversation with your husband and then with your friends coming over and bearing witness and sitting with you, is it that humility playing in again? Was there like your confidence grew before through humility? Was there a degree of humility that you needed to even have those conversations?
I think so. For sure, humility, for sure, being honest with myself and vulnerable with them and kind of exposing myself in a way that I hadn't before. And maybe it's just becoming more human about it. Like I have
Mm,
limitations now. I can only do so much. And there's something in recognizing your own limitations and your own humanity in there that's pretty powerful and grounding in a way.
and how are you able to do that and maintain your own confidence? Or was it doing
Oh, I
that
wasn't.
and re
To be clear, I was not.
Mm,
I think internally, I think what we probably haven't talked about yet is the depression that happened as a result, the
mm,
anxiety that happened, the idea that this was my fault, the idea that if I was stronger, I could have changed the outcome, that if I was a different person, it would have been different, right? Like there, all of that
yeah.
stuff was happening, facing the fact that I wouldn't be able to get back on a horse again. And that had been half of my identity for more
Mm,
than 20 years. So there was depression, anxiety, extraordinary grief over losing this experience with horses that was so magical and having to maybe step away from that horse community because it was when I did go back months later to be with my horse and to step back into that community, it was just the pain of it. The physical had started to heal really well by then. But man, the mental part and the emotional part was shattered because it was just too painful.
and it's is how you were reacting to it those first weeks, was that an attempt to try to avoid some of that anxiety or some of that realization or
I think so. I think I couldn't have I don't think I could have handled the weight of getting through the physical,
Mm,
right? Figuring out just how to move my body, how to be conscious about how to move my body for things that we don't normally have to think about. I could not have borne the weight of that
mm.
and the mental and emotional part of it at the same time. It just was too much. So I think that this, what you're alluding to, like this initial first few weeks of like, no, no, I'm going to be okay. I was anything but okay. I couldn't face it. I couldn't
Mm.
talk about it. I couldn't even present that to the world. And I couldn't even be really aware of it.
And is it fair to say then that the conversation with your husband was both like realizing that you were having an impact, but maybe at the same realizing maybe you don't have to bear all of that alone?
Yes. Yeah. That did start to appear.
Mm,
And part of that was having to start to talk about how hard it is, how guilty I felt about not going through it alone, right? Like it would be, it'd be
yeah.
easier if I just went through it alone. I wouldn't be a burden.
And how did you start to navigate then with friends or with, I think you talked about your physical therapist, like tell me about the process of being able to share this or not do it alone. How did they help you and how did you build that capacity to do it together as opposed to alone?
I wish I could say that there was some enlightening conversation that we had or something that we did that made this
Mhm,
happen. When I talked with my friends about it the other day, it was the first time we'd ever talked
mhm,
about this series of events. It was really much more moment by moment. I don't
mm.
remember there being, outside of that conversation with my husband and the conversation with the neurosurgeon, I don't really remember there being a moment when all of this started to shift. But I remember when I said to my friend that was visiting, like, She said, "You seem like you're doing really well." And I started to cry a little bit because I was like, I'm not well." And she
Yeah.
just kind of nodded and was like, "That tracks. That makes sense." There wasn't a big conversation that followed that. It was these moments of kind of small acknowledgments. I think it really took many weeks and many months for me to start to acknowledge what was coming next for me in terms of the mental and emotional healing.
And so then the that acknowledgement sounds to me like the way you were building back the confidence slowly, like in acknowledging with your community, like not in just one thing, but like in these small little moments that were safe enough perhaps to be able to admit that
Yeah.
those things. What were they doing that allowed you to feel that safety?
This is the two friends that came over. We all worked together, and we all rode horses together. We There was a shared lived experience, and for them, in conversation with them, it like just showing up and sitting and being there, sending the little funny memes or a dirty joke every once in a while or
Mhm.
coming over, like just that's who they are as people, right? For their close friends, this is how they show up, right? And because we were so close, one of them said it was very easy to see because of how close we are, how much you needed that. It was
Mm.
very easy for us to spot that, even if you
And
couldn't.
and is it fair to say that then them showing up as themselves helped you feel safe enough to show up as yourself?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
in those yeah.
And I think that I haven't said this part yet, but when they would come sit with me, no matter what state I was in, if I was crying or if I was, the armor was back on, they just met me where I was, right? They didn't try to change it. They didn't try to fix it. They didn't try to say, oh, everything's going to be okay. They
Mm,
just bore witness to it. And
mm,
that was magical. That was amazing to not have someone come in and try to take it away or
mm.
wash it away.
Because it gave you what does it
I think when we go through these moments of tragedy and grief and trauma, I think that having someone bear witness to your grief is a way of making you feel seen and heard and like it matters, like that pain and grief means something, like it's
mm,
worth something. Because when we try to wash it away or tell someone, no, 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 everything's going to be okay, we actually wind up dismissing that pain because it's too much for the
mm.
person on the other side to carry. But
When you
when they just bear witness to it, they help you carry it. Does that make sense?
yeah, and I don't know if this question can be answered, but when you say like the pain is worth something, it means something. What does it mean? When somebody's not trying to wash it away and get rid of it, what does it mean?
I think it means that whatever you're letting go of in that moment or whatever you're moving through in that moment, that it matters, that it's a fundamental part of being human, and that is as much of who you are as the rest of you that is widely known, right? I think
So
it
so
means that it's part of what makes you whole.
so if your pain matters, then you matter.
To some degree, I think there's a lot to be said for that.
And how much during that time was the idea that you matter something you were trying to wrestle with?
The whole time. Yeah.
And I think that piecing together of how profound that is, right? Just someone sitting with us, and if our pain matters, then we matter, because that's sort of the thing that we can't share, right? The part that, we can wrestle in our head with this idea of like, do I matter in these times? Like, am I, my own internal value, however that plays out, being able to tell somebody like, I don't feel like I matter right now. And versus in this case, not having to say that out loud and having somebody acknowledge it at the same time, right?
Pretty powerful.
Who did that help you become as you start to get back into your, into this new life and this new, right, you?
I think this Hmm. It was the first step of a really, really long journey. I think that it has made me, in larger part, able to sit with my own pain differently. My relationship to pain has changed. And
Mm,
I think it's made me maybe better and more curious and more spacious with other people's pain.
mm,
Because we all have it, right? And I don't want to like hold us in this pain thing that's the only thing that defines who we are. But my, sometimes it feels like we live in a world that says, I only want to see the parts of you that feel safe to me.
yeah.
And I feel like this experience helped me shed this. Like I'm okay with seeing the parts of you that feel scary or feel painful or feel raw or feel, and it taught me how to be empathetic and soft and gentle to the best of my ability with that.
Mm. Because is that is that like an expression of love then?
I think so.
Mm.
Yeah.
How did that then, when you think about now you have to come back, and it sounds like it was a while, like 4 or 6 weeks of these small but profound moments with friends. Was that the kind of community going through it? It sounds like was your personal trainer and a couple of friends and your husband with COVID. How did the relationships at work maintain, and then how were they different when you started coming back?
Work was tough. The company I work for was amazing and supportive. I came back, I think, after 8 weeks, not because they asked me to, but just because I did. I think it was way too soon. I know that I had not been able to recognize what was happening for me with the anxiety and depression around it. I just wasn't aware of it. I knew I was off. I knew I wasn't
Hmm.
me. I knew I watched myself like being short with people. I watched myself like sit in front of a computer screen and literally like watching everything dance because like my focus from the trauma was just not there. But I was like, no, I can power through this. I look what I've just come through. I can power through this. And it showed up even with my family and friends. Like I couldn't, it was so hard for me to be a passenger in a car without holding on to the handles of everything, being like, oh my God, you're too close. Oh my God, you're too close. You're too close. Because I was
Hmm.
still on, like physiologically, like on high alert. Every part of my body, even if I was in a crowded place, it was like, no, it's too much. I can't. I just remember this feeling of I can't right now. And it took a long time to get through that, and a lot of conversations with my therapist and a lot of work with my trainer who is such a fun source of light in my life. And I remember he would ask me to do something that was just outside of my comfort zone, and I would burst into tears and like literally freeze. And so
Hmm.
it took at least a year to start to move through that. And it took a long time for me to even be aware that that was happening.
And what would you describe it was happening there?
Grief and
Mhm.
having to walk away from my passion. You're faced with this hole in your identity that was filled with horses and this life of competing and going to the barn and this almost spiritual connection with your animals, just not having that
Mm.
and
And
being
so
like, who am I in this? I don't know who Jen is in this. And when I look at her now, I don't know how cool I am with what I'm seeing.
was some of those little moments you talk about when you were things aren't okay or in front of your, with your physical therapist when it would be like stop here and then I've got to go through again. It sounds to me like that is almost this like, am I this person or am I this person? And almost using their feedback, like having them there made it safe for you to start being this new person that you didn't maybe even
Mhm,
have a definition for.
mhm. Yeah,
Mhm.
it took a lot of redefining myself through the eyes of other people
Te-
at the start.
Tell me more about that. Define yourself through the eyes of other
Like I,
people.
I was so lost. I didn't know who I was. It took a lot of me believing in what other people were telling me about me. Like,
Mm.
you can do this, you're strong enough now. Like, telling me that they see me as this, whatever it might be.
I don't know that I've heard a more coherent sort of definition. Theoretically, I've talked to people about the idea that like our very identity is a communal construct. Whether it's our self confidence or self awareness or self belief happens in community. And I think what you described is like for a year, if not more, like you had to rebuild that sense of identity from a very well established, here's who I am, here's what I'm about, here's where my confidence is, into what is this going to look like? Can I even do it? Into this big unknown with community, like with those daily interactions. And what's striking is that it wasn't, we get tied to these kind of movie, it was one moment and then it all, but I hear over and over again, it was these small moments of sort of making the choice. Am I going to be this person?
Yeah.
And how are people going to respond to that?
And, it wasn't straight either. It was a series of small moments. And after about a year, after a certain point in time, people start to think you're okay, right? The conversations around that kind of stop. But the work up here and in your heart doesn't actually stop. And so I slid back, right? I slid back into doing it alone. Because
Yeah.
also there was a point in there when that accident defined me.
Yeah.
So you move far enough past that, and then you're kind of left with, well, what is this? So you slide back into just trying to white knuckle it through. And I white knuckled it for a long time, probably another 2 years, without talking much about it.
And then what changed?
I had some feedback from all areas of my life. I had a mirror held up for me that really led me to see that maybe the white knuckling through, people spot the cracks in that. People spot
Hmm.
the cracks in the armor because what was really happening for me would kind of seep through. Yeah, it really made me go back into what's really happening for me. How much of my story has not been shared? How much of what really is happening is just being squished inside and it's coming out in all these weird ways. So,
Mm.
yeah.
And that it's interesting, like hearing that again, that like we kind of retreat into ourselves. I've got it figured out, and then nature, sort of almost like nature naturally puts this pressure on, like, okay, but this is going to come out some way.
Somehow it's gonna come out somehow. So I think, you can, I feel like doing this work is like peeling an onion, right? You're only able to do so much at any given time. Maybe
Mhm.
allow me to go a little deeper into figuring out who I really am at this point.
And what's sort of the equivalent of the friend sitting in the room for you now? right? Like in that kind of, in the second iteration of it, as it were, like what does that confronting, here's who I am, look like in the second act?
The second act looks more like they still sit with me in the room, right? It's a different room, it's a different space. But I think now I've learned how to sit with my own pain around it and
Mm,
not try to change it and to just be like, hi, hi, you're here.
mm. And does that make it easier to share it? Does it also make it easier for others to share with you, do you think?
I'd like to think, I hope. That's a question I've always found tough to answer. Like, people do share a lot with me really openly. So I hope so. I think the less judgment I put on my own pain, the less judgment I put on others' pain. And the more
Mm,
time I can spend just observing my own allows me to just observe others without trying to fix it, change it, or alter
mhm.
it.
And I think that, even sharing your story on here, or when somebody sits with you, like having the vulnerability to be honest, here's my story, here's what it is. What, for me, that as I look at that, in those acts of being honest and open with our own story, we give permission for others to
Yeah,
share theirs, right?
absolutely.
Whether it's with us or with somebody else, right?
Absolutely.
And is that a bit more of a conscious thought for you now? Like, does it sounds like your approach to leadership, and even maybe some of becoming a coach, was very much rooted in this new identity.
Mhm.
Yeah. And what does that look like now? What does that confidence look like? And what is, if you were to describe the new identity, how would you do that?
I don't know if I still don't know if I would use the word confident. I think that's
Mm,
probably an ongoing body of work for the rest of my life as somebody who's got pretty significant anxiety and stuff, right? Like, but I think now maybe it's more about presence
mm.
as opposed to confidence,
Was it
presence and
presence?
acceptance.
Was it that before the accident, or is that in the new version?
I think that's new because I think before I tended to rush through my own pain or other people's pain or other people's story to just get to the other side of it, right? Because sometimes the meat of the story was too hard to listen
Mhm.
to or to feel, and
Mm.
I rush less. I feel a lot less like I'm blowing through life at a million miles an hour.
Is it that presence is what you bring to both the leadership and the coaching, but is it also what you're kind of trying to help others create for themselves?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
How do you see yourself creating that?
Oh God. That's a great question. It's so hard to articulate this stuff.
Hmm.
I think the more awareness we have of the lenses through which we see the world, I think the more awareness we have of what our body tells us about what we're feeling, the more we can have agency with how we show up. We can make choices in how we show up. We can't make bad things stop happening to us. We can't make, but we can maybe look at our role and how things unfold a little differently.
Hmm. And doing that with that presence and that self compassion and that empathy.
Mhm. That is the actual harder thing to develop. And that is like just showing up for it every day.
Hmm.
There's not a hack, there's not a shortcut, there's not a quick way through it.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit every day.
Yeah. And as you, I think, so eloquently articulated earlier, it's also, having the community that allows us to show up like that, right?
Absolutely.
Like both building
Absolutely.
that and engaging that.
I think when we can show up a little bit more honestly about who we are and where we're at, then it gives space for everybody else to do that too. And then it becomes just, it's this really rich cycle that gives back to itself. It builds its own energy. It becomes much bigger than me or you. It becomes a much bigger thing. It's
Hmm.
about us.
As you're sharing that, I think about, when I'm on stage, I was talking to Jamie about this week that I'm fairly selective about when I talk about my father's death, because that was a very redefining moment for me, but that being selective about where we share that is scary and it's trying, but it also helps remind us that, oh, you're not doing that alone. Right. And that if we can do that, we help give somebody permission to not do it alone. Because I think, even years later, we have these moments where that doubt comes back, where that fear comes back. And the scary thing is you've defined so well as not receding back, not retreating back into myself, but having those little moments of connection that allow me to see the good within myself.
Yeah.
Jen, this was a fantastic conversation. And I want to thank you for just the bravery, the vulnerability, the articulation. I think you've articulated some things that I've been trying to articulate for 4 years. And you did it one call better than I. Is there anything you want to add?
I just want to say thank you so much for creating this really safe space for not just me, but for other people to share their stories. It does really help remind me of my own humanity and that we all go through stuff and that everybody has a story and they need to be heard. And thank you for allowing me to be part of this incredible body of work you're putting together. It's really an honor.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And thank you, anybody that was listening as we wrap up, which is a real powerful conversation for me. And I hope for you all listening, I think to almost paraphrase what Jen said there, but also to reinforce what we say at the end of all of these, that there are so many things in life we can't get through alone, but there is nothing we can't get through together. This is the Finding Good podcast. My name's Brian Fretwell. I'm the founder of a company called Finding Good and the host of this podcast. I very much appreciate you taking the time to engage and listen to this podcast, and I encourage you to go to findinggood.com if building connection into your coaching practice, your leadership practice, or your life is important to you. Many of the questions you heard today come from the type of questions we teach people in Finding Good, so that whether you're helping your coaching client through a big challenge, your team in your leadership, or those around you to build community, you can be certain that each and every one of them feel that they're not doing it alone and that they can do anything together. We'll see you in the next episode.